Made millions flipping houses. Lost my family chasing more. My name's Mike Callahan, and in 2004, I was a 35-year-old construction worker in Phoenix, Arizona, hauling lumber under a brutal sun for $15 an hour. My wife, Laura, taught high school English in Tempe, her paycheck covering our rent while I scraped together enough for groceries and our son Ethan's soccer gear. Ethan was 8, a dreamer with a spiral notebook full of house sketches, mansions with pools and skylights. He'd show me after dinner, saying, "Dad, can we live here someday?" I'd ruffle his hair and say, "One day, buddy." But I was just a guy with calluses and a beat-up toolbox, dreaming as big as he was with no clue how to make it happen. The housing boom hit like a lottery, and I overheard guys on job sites talking about flipping houses, buy low, fix up, sell high. It sounded like my ticket out. I pitched it to Laura over tacos one night, laying out a plan to use our $20,000 savings for a rundown ranch style in Tempe. She pushed her plate away, worry creasing her face. "Mike, that's all we have. What if it flops?" I grabbed her hand, my voice steady. "Babe, this is our shot at the big time. Trust me." She nodded, lips tight, but I could see the fear in her eyes. I was already sold on being more than a paycheck-to-paycheck guy. 3 months later, I sold that house for a $60,000 profit. It was like hitting a slot machine jackpot. The money was great, but the real high was proving I could play the game and win. I came home with a $200 bottle of Napa Valley Cabernet, and Laura laughed when I mispronounced it. Ethan thought I was a wizard, trailing me to job sites, begging to swing a hammer. "You're gonna be rich, Dad," he said, grinning ear to ear. By 2005, I was flipping for houses at once, pulling in $300,000 that year. We moved into a 5-bedroom in Scottsdale with a pool and a view of Camelback Mountain. I quit construction, bought a black Escalade, and started hosting pool parties, where I'd brag about deals over single malt scotch. Neighbors called me the real estate guy, and I loved it. By 2006, I was a millionaire on paper. I'd flipped dozens of houses, netting $1.2 million in profit that year alone. We upgraded again to a 6,000 square foot estate in Paradise Valley, marble floors, a home theater, a 3-car garage with a Tesla for Laura and a Porsche for me. Laura quit teaching, and we sent Ethan to a private school with kids of CEOs and pro golfers. I'd take him to job sites in my Porsche, letting him ride shotgun while I talked deals on speakerphone. "This is how you build an empire, buddy," I'd say, and he'd nod, sketching skyscrapers in his notebook. Laura was cautious, though. "Mike, we're set. Why keep pushing?" she asked one night. Standing in our gourmet kitchen, I waved her off. "This is just the start, babe. I'm building a legacy." I went big, borrowing $3 million against our house for a 20-unit condo tower in downtown Phoenix. The plan was to sell luxury lofts to tech brothers and retirees, raking in $10 million. Ethan drew renderings of the tower, labeling it Callahan Plaza. His faith fueled me. But Laura's doubts grew louder. "We don't need more, Mike," she said, her voice sharp. I snapped back. "I'm doing this for us, for Ethan's future." But deep down, I was hooked on the rush of bigger deals, bigger wins. The market was red hot, and I felt untouchable, like I could bend it to my will. I ignored the whispers of a slowdown, betting everything on my next score, not seeing the storm coming. In 2007, I was living the dream, or so I thought. My real estate empire was booming, with $5 million in assets across Phoenix. The condo tower was halfway built, and I'd added a strip mall in Scottsdale to my portfolio. A $2 million project I was sure would land leases with high-end retailers. I was flipping luxury homes on the side, each one netting 6 figures. We threw parties at our Paradise Valley estate, with catered sushi and live jazz, my buddies from the real estate world toasting my success. I'd stand by the pool, scotch in hand, telling stories of outbidding hedge funds. Ethan, now 10, would sneak downstairs, watching wide-eyed as I held court. "That's my dad," he'd whisper to his friends, his chest puffed with pride. Laura wasn't as sold. She'd mingle at the parties, all smiles, but later, in our bedroom, she'd question me. "Mike, you're borrowing too much. What if this all stops? I'd laugh, pulling her close. Babe, the market's a rocket. I'm just riding it. But the condo project was hitting snags, permits stalled. Construction costs doubled to $5 million, and I had to borrow another $2 million to keep it going. I didn't tell Laura the details. I couldn't stand her "I told you so" look. Instead, I doubled down, taking a $1.5 million loan for a second strip mall in Tempe, picturing it as a tech hub. The numbers were tight, but I was Mike Callahan, the guy who turned $20,000 into millions. I wasn't worried. Ethan was my biggest fan. He'd ride with me to the condo site, sketching glass towers in his notebook. "Can we name it after you, Dad?" he asked, his voice full of awe. I grinned, promising him a plaque with Callahan Enterprises on it. His belief kept me going, even as Laura's doubts grew louder. She went back to teaching part-time, saying it was for stability. It felt like a jab, like she didn't trust me to keep the money flowing. One night, I snapped, "I'm building an empire, Laura. You don't need to play safety net." She stared at me, her eyes cold. "Someone has to think about Ethan," she said, and walked out. I stood in our marble-floored foyer, the silence deafening. I started dealing with shadier lenders to keep the cash flowing. A guy named Vince, with a slick suit and a predator's smile, offered a $1 million bridge loan at 20% interest. I took it, thinking I could flip a McMansion in Arcadia to cover it. The house sat and sold, the market slowing. Vince's calls got pushier, his tone sharper. I'd lie to Laura, saying everything was under control, but she'd catch me pacing at 3 a.m., my phone buzzing with creditor texts. "What's going on, Mike?" she asked, her voice trembling. I brushed it off. "Delays, nothing major." But her silence said she knew I was hiding something. "Ethan overheard our fights," his face pale. "You guys always yell now," he said, running to his room. I wanted to follow, but I was too buried in my own mess, chasing a high that was slipping away. The 2008 crash hit like a freight train, and my empire collapsed overnight. The condo tower was a $7 million disaster. Buyers vanished, and the bank demanded the $5 million loan back. The Scottsdale strip mall sat empty, no retailers in sight, at $2 million whole. The Tempe project was worse, half-built and bleeding cash. I sold our Paradise Valley estate to cover what I could, but it wasn't enough. $3 million barely touched the debt. We moved into a 2-bedroom rental in Mesa, with creaky floors and a stove that barely worked. Laura looked at me like a stranger. "You said this wouldn't happen, Mike," she whispered, her voice raw so Ethan wouldn't hear. I couldn't meet her eyes, my throat tight with shame. Ethan tried to keep things normal. He dragged me to the backyard to kick a soccer ball, asking about my next deal like nothing had changed. "We'll get another big house, right, Dad?" he said, his voice hopeful but shaky. I'd nod, faking confidence, but I was crumbling. Inside, I kept chasing flips, small ones, hoping to claw back some cash, but the market was a graveyard. Houses sat and sold, and creditors called nonstop, their voicemails like knives. Laura noticed, her jaw clenching every time the phone rang. "How bad is it, Mike?" she asked, her tone sharp. I mumbled about temporary setbacks, but her silence screamed she wasn't fooled. I got desperate, leaning on Vince and his crew. They sent guys to our door when payments were late. A thug in a cheap suit, smoking outside our rental, made Laura freeze. "Who are these people, Mike?" she asked, her voice trembling with fear and anger. I tried to downplay it. "Business. Just a rough patch," but she wasn't buying it. "You're risking everything we have left," she said, walking away. Ethan overheard, his face pale. "Dad, are we in trouble?" he asked, his voice small. I said no, but my voice cracked. He still defended me to Laura, though. "Dad's got a plan, Mom," he'd say, his tone fierce but wavering. I could see doubt in his eyes, and it hurt worse than any foreclosure notice. Our fights turned brutal. Laura was back to teaching full-time, our paychecks keeping us afloat. Every dollar she earned felt like a slap, a reminder I'd failed. We'd argue about money, about the life we'd lost, about who I'd become. "You're not the man I married," she said one night, her words cutting deeper than anything. I wanted to argue, to say it was still me, but she was right. I wasn't the guy who'd built an empire anymore. Ethan still had my back, telling Laura to give me a chance, his voice cracking with loyalty. But I could feel him slipping. Torn between his faith in me and the reality of our broken life, I'd lie awake, listening to the rentals pipes groan, wondering how I'd let it all fall apart. By 2009, I was a ghost in my own life, haunting a rental that felt like someone else's failure. The business was gone, our savings obliterated, and we were living off Laura's teaching salary. Creditors hounded us, their calls a constant hum. Some nights, I'd unplug the phone just to breathe. My old real estate buddies, the ones I'd toasted with at pool parties, stopped returning my calls. Laura and I barely spoke. She'd come home, cook dinner, and sit with Ethan, helping him with math homework, while I stared at my laptop, pretending to hustle. The truth was, I was out of moves, just going through the motions to keep from breaking completely. Ethan, at 11, still tried to lift me up. He'd show me his sketchbook, filled with drawings of houses we'd never owned, castles with moats, penthouses with city views. "This one's got a pool for you, Dad," he'd say, pointing to a scribbled mansion. I'd force a smile, but it felt like a lie. One night, I overheard Laura talking to him in his room. "Your father's choices hurt us, Ethan," she said, her voice heavy with exhaustion. He snapped back. "He's trying, Mom. Why can't you see that? His loyalty broke me." I wanted to barge in, promise I'd fix it all, but I stood frozen outside his door, listening to my son fight my battles, feeling like a fraud. I knew I had to do something real. Flipping was dead in this market, so I started looking for steady work. I landed a job at a hardware store in Tempe, stocking shelves and selling nails to contractors I used to hire. It paid $15 an hour, gut punch compared to the millions I'd made. Laura noticed, but her response was cold. "It's a start, Mike," she said, her tone flat, like I was a tenant late on rent. I wanted to scream that I was trying, that I was killing myself to make things right, but I swallowed it. Instead, I threw myself into the job, taking extra shifts, organizing stock until midnight, hoping Laura would see I was still fighting, still worth something. Ethan was starting to drift. He stopped showing me his drawings, stopped asking about my day. One afternoon, I found him in the backyard, kicking his soccer ball against the fence, the thwack echoing like a heartbeat. "You okay, buddy?" I asked, leaning against the doorframe. He shrugged, eyes on the ground. "Mom says you messed up big," he said, his voice barely audible. I tried to explain the market crashed. It wasn't all my fault, but it sounded like excuses, even to me. "I'm fixing it, Ethan," I said, my voice steady as I could make it. He nodded, but his silence said he wasn't sure anymore. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, the weight of his doubt heavier than any debt I'd ever owed. In 2010, Laura pushed me into therapy, saying I needed to figure out why I kept chasing risks that burned us. I hated it at first, sitting in a stuffy office, spilling my guts to a guy who asked how I felt about losing millions. It felt like ripping open a wound, but I stuck with it, mostly for Ethan. I wanted him to see his dad trying to be better, not just the guy who tanked an empire. The therapist dug into how I'd tied my worth to money, to being the guy who could outsmart the market. It was a brutal truth. I'd spent years thinking one more deal would make me enough for Laura, for Ethan, for myself. Admitting that was like admitting I'd been chasing a mirage. Laura was teaching full-time again, her third-grade classroom keeping us fed. Every paycheck she brought home felt like a quiet jab, a reminder I wasn't the provider anymore. We'd sit at dinner, and she'd talk about her students, their science projects, their bad handwriting, her voice warm until she looked at me. Then it'd go cold, like I was a stranger crashing her table. Ethan tried to fill the silence, telling stories about school or soccer, but I could see the strain in his eyes. At 12, he was old enough to feel the fracture in our family, even if he didn't have the words for it. I'd watch him push his peas around, trying to hold us together. And it killed me that he had to. I started showing up more, desperate to prove I was still in this. I'd drive Ethan to soccer practice, cheering louder than the other dads, hoping he'd see I was still his hero. I'd help with his homework, stumbling through algebra, just to sit close to him. Laura noticed, but she kept her distance. One night, I tried talking to her, really talking, in our cramped kitchen with its peeling linoleum. I'm trying to fix this, Laura, I said, my voice raw from holding it together. She looked at me. Her eyes tired but softer than usual. It's not about fixing, Mike. It's about trust, and that's gone. I didn't know how to rebuild that, but I swore I'd try. For a while, it felt like we were inching towards something better, not the mansion days, but a new kind of normal. Ethan still defended me. Even when Laura vented about the stress, the bills, the life we'd lost, Dad's working hard, Mom, he'd say, his voice sharp, almost desperate, but I could see him wrestling with doubts. One day, he asked me point blank, "Why didn't you stop, Dad, when we had the big house and the cars?" I fumbled for an answer, talking about wanting the best for us, about building a legacy. It sounded hollow, even to me. He nodded, but his eyes didn't meet mine. And I felt him slipping further away. I started staying up later, replaying every choice I'd made, promising myself I'd do whatever it took to bring my family back. By 2011, I was clawing my way towards something like redemption, or at least a foothold. The hardware store job wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, and I'd been promoted to assistant manager, which came with a $2,000 raise and a shred of dignity. I kept up with therapy and packing. Why? I bet everything on risky deals. Why? I thought money could fix who I was. It wasn't easy, but it was starting to click. Why I'd pushed so hard. Why I'd ignored Laura's warnings. She noticed the change, and things softened a bit. She'd smile sometimes, small ones, like a crack of sunlight through a storm. Ethan, though, was quieter. His loyalty to me fraying under the weight of our reality. I could feel it, but I kept pushing, determined to show them I could rebuild what I'd broken. I decided to go all in for Thanksgiving that year, our first in the rental. I wanted it to be a reset, a chance to prove we could still be a family, even without the mansion and the millions. I spent days planning a turkey roasted with herbs, stuffing with sausage and sage, green beans with almonds, and a pecan pie I'd practiced 3 times to nail. I bought a new tablecloth to cover our wobbly folding table, hoping it'd dress up the moment. Laura agreed to help, chopping carrots beside me in the kitchen, and for a few hours, it felt like the old days, when we'd laugh and steal bites of dough before dinner. Ethan set the table, humming a song from school, his mood lighter than it had been in months. I let myself believe this was it, the turning point we needed. That night, we sat down together, the 3 of us, the table crowded with food I'd poured my heart into. Ethan was 12 now, taller, his voice deeper, his eyes carrying a weight no kid should bear. Laura passed the mashed potatoes, and I caught a flicker of warmth in her smile, the kind I hadn't seen since our Paradise Valley days. For a moment, I believed we could heal, that we were stitching ourselves back together. Then my phone buzzed on the counter. Creditor, one of Vince's guys, leaving a voicemail about seizing what little we had left. I ignored it, but Laura saw my face go tight. "What's wrong, Mike?" she asked, her voice sharp, slicing through the warmth. I tried to brush it off, saying it was nothing, just work. But Ethan slammed his fork down. "Why can't you just stop, Dad?" he said, his eyes locked on mine, not angry but worse, betrayed, like he'd finally given up on me. Laura stood, grabbed her plate, and walked to the kitchen without a word. Ethan followed, his footsteps heavy, leaving me alone at the table, the turkey untouched, the weight of my failures heavier than ever.